Okay.
I'm going to see if I can go live on Facebook, and if it's too much hassle, we'll leave it. Okay, so we're doing a talk on
I'll put my glasses on actually. I can't actually see you very well.
Oh, that's probably for the best. Right, I'm going to put this, I'm going to go live and we'll just see. Yikes.
Yep, meeting's being live streamed.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ignore the. Okay. Yay, Alex, we meet again.
We do.
Yes. And our last conversation, which we recorded, was all about addiction and recovery.
Yep.
And I know that's helped lots of people, had loads of great feedback from that, including someone very dear to me who has given up alcohol as a result. So it's, well done. So I'm very proud of that person. What came up in that last conversation was a really important point was why we turn to kind of addictive behavior is often to numb the emotions because we don't know how to deal with them. So that was something that really came up for you.
Yeah.
And particularly, I think more so for men are kind of taught, and your generation, man up, don't get all emotional, don't be a wuss, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So with you've obviously overcome that and found ways, so we thought that would be a really great thing to share. Yeah. So let's start with, what's the danger of suppressing our emotions? What would you say to that?
I'd say the danger of suppressing emotions is that they will come out, basically, and emotions are just a kind of they're part of your sort of psychological and probably hormonal process. They're part of being human. They're actually underpinned by instincts, and we have three main instincts as human beings. There's the instinct for reproduction, because if our forebears hadn't reproduced, we wouldn't be here. So we've got that. There's an instinct for safety and security, which again, if our forebears hadn't secured themselves, then they probably wouldn't be able to reproduce or raise family, blah blah blah. And then there's an instinct for a place in a society. Human beings grouped together, and the ones that grouped together were more successful than the ones that went alone, I guess. So that we're a result of that. And those instincts are absolutely part of everybody's existence. And we don't have any control over that. Problem is that in some people, and people who exhibit addictive traits, it's definitely true that some of these instincts just kind of overreach. They're out of kilter, they're not in balance, and then that triggers an emotional kind of response.
Yeah.
And what we need to try to do, because for someone who has addiction issues, we have these emotions. We don't quite, we especially as a bloke of my age, wasn't really taught about that. Wasn't taught how to understand that or what it was. Was kind of taught the best thing to do is try and ignore it and carry on. And that kind of means that you end up bottling it, and instead of processing it properly, especially my more dysfunctional instinctive response, emotional response to the instincts, we just tend to sort of drink or drug them away, really. And so either, we can grow up in some kind of a balance where we learn how to process these emotions properly, or we don't, and they are totally unmanageable, and we basically are then dominated by them. And that's the issue. If we don't learn how to process these things properly, we bottle them up, they come out anyway, and they usually come out wrong, and they come out in behaviors which can be damaging for us.
Yeah, for us and others too. It affects everyone around us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And stops us getting close and forming healthy relationships with others if we can't be understand what's going on within us. We can't connect.
Or if we do connect, sometimes it stops us from forming healthy boundaries, so we go one way or the other, but the balance isn't quite there.
So we suppress the emotions because they're alien to us, because we've never been shown what to do with them or what they mean, or we can often think if something feels bad or overwhelming, the mind can tell us that we're going to feel that way forever. So we need to quickly escape from it somehow because we can't handle it. But we need our emotions, don't we? We need our emotions. They serve a purpose. They guide us. So they tell us what's going on. They tell us what's wrong, what's going well, what we need to come away from, what we need to go towards, and so much more. And of course, our emotions are ever changing. They're transient. And if we can sit with those emotions and let them move through us, and we're going to move on to how we can do that and process those emotions healthily, we can move on to the next thing. We can take a step, or we can get some momentum in some healthy way. We can take the emotion as a guidance towards something better. But your experience was, for a long time, to numb those emotions until it got to a point where, well, where did it have to get to for you?
It got to a point of rock bottom, really. Most people who've been through addictive, some kind of addiction recovery process, talk about a rock bottom. It wasn't really dramatic, it was just this really empty loneliness, really, that I felt I can't keep going like this. I don't know what's wrong, but I can't carry on like this. And that's quite a sort of a very isolated place, and quite a frightening place, really, because it's a place of helplessness, which is really the cause of a lot of our trauma, or is caused by a lot of our ongoing trauma, at least, is that sense of hopelessness or feelings of helplessness. So that's kind of where it gets me to. It got me to being a sort of daily drinker, a daily drug user, and really sort of to a point where my relationship, my job, my health was all kind of on the line, and I was one of the lucky ones, because I didn't lose everything, but some people do, and yet they'll still keep on going. I think the other thing to understand about sort of undiagnosed or untreated emotion is that it also informs our thoughts. And, if a trap that a lot of people fall into is to think that we are our thoughts, and our thoughts are us. And actually, with an undiagnosed, untreated emotion or an unprocessed emotion, that can drive some really weird thoughts in people's minds, and very often, certainly in people who are struggling with addiction, our minds tell us lies, really, and a lot of those lies are triggered by emotion, or uncomfortable feeling, and as you said, we often get a feeling, and our first thought is, I've got to get rid of this, and the easy way is to just take a drink or take a drug, and that puts everything on hold for a bit. So I feel overwhelmed, and then some drink and drugs is my answer. It's not the problem, it's the answer. I'm the problem. The way that I respond to situations in life is the problem. My emotional response is the problem, you know, and I've become kind of very unmanageable without really knowing it. You know, this is how I grew up. So I didn't know any different. I thought this was normal, you know, and it's only when I had a chance or an opportunity to pause, reflect and do some work on it that I realized that I didn't have to be that way, you know, and that was kind of important. And there's a process, you know, there's a process that we can learn that helps us to just get hold of those, you know, those thoughts and those feelings, and just work out whether they're real or they're false, you know, whether your brain's giving you a false reading here, and, you know, to understand where that comes from. And once I can understand where it comes from and why I am doing that, because I used to get angry all the time. I used to get really angry all the time about stuff, you know, and sometimes it was about trivia. In fact, most of the things I just got really upset about weren't, in the general scheme of things, once I stopped and got a perspective on them, weren't really worth getting upset about, but they were very important to me, you know. And it's kind of self-defense in a way. It was kind of a way of stopping myself from feeling hopeless, really, and feeling fear. So, you know, I learned a process that just got me to pause, first of all, as you say, just sit with it. I mean, ultimately that feeling passes, you know. It might feel uncomfortable, but it passes, you know. Or if I want to stop it from continuing to resurface, then I can do a process and I can understand where it comes from, or what is it that I'm bringing to bring that emotion up. Because at the end of the day, if I'm angry, you know, if I'm angry with you, it's nothing to do with you. It's all to do with me. It's my anger, you know, and I can point fingers at people and blame them for everything. But ultimately, that isn't the reason I'm angry. It's why I think I'm angry, but it's not actually why I'm angry. And I have to understand what I'm angry about.
So we've got this kind of societal problem where often we're not modeled how to process emotions, or we're told that, oh, don't be so emotional, or you know, men don't cry, don't feel, get over it, yeah, deal with it, there's worse things, you know. That's something that really triggers me, I think, is this well, two things. One, so many of my clients come saying, oh, but I'm just an anxious person. They've labeled themselves that way. I'm just anxious. That's just me. And they're not, you know, they're not. They just need to learn to deal with it. But also, you know, we're not shown how to deal with it, how to process it. And that's why we want to bring this process to light and bring it into conversation and just help people to maybe see that there is another way. Because when we don't process it, it is very lonely. The mind takes over. We think we're the only one feeling that. We think we're a hopeless cause, etc. And of course, we're not. And yeah, often we are told, like you say, get over it. Or there's
grow a pair.
Grow a pair, yeah, grow a pair. Don't be so emotional. Grow a pair. Or, oh, is it the time of the month? You know, you're a bit emotion, So we've kind of got all these negative associations with emotions, and also I don't think we are ever really taught the range of emotions that are coming up in us, because often we'll ask each other, oh, how you doing? Yeah, I'm good. I'm shit. I'm okay. I'm pissed off.
I was all right. I was always all right. I'm all right. That's it. Didn't know really. Couldn't tell you. I knew if I was happy or sad, I guess, but I didn't really know much beyond that, to be honest.
So your default was, I'm all right.
Yeah, everything's okay. It's always like push away. Don't get near me. I don't, you know, I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm all right. Stay away. You know, it's that really. Yeah.
Okay. So what should we look at first? Should we look at the range of emotions, or should we look at the process?
Why don't we look at a range of emotions? I mean, I learned a little basket of emotions, really, not many, but just enough which seemed to cover the bases. You know, I knew that if I was angry, I knew if my pride was affected. Yeah. I knew if I was feeling sort of lustful. I knew if I was feeling lazy. Those were the kind of responses I would have, really. But when I say anger, it was like real anger, or greedy. I could get greedy and gluttonous about stuff, particularly greedy, and again, triggered response to emotion, instinct going slightly wrong. A fear that I wasn't getting enough, sort of a fear that I wasn't part of, or my instinct to be part of, to be secure in myself, got displaced, and so I'd get greedy about stuff. This is kind of how it worked. So I got those, and I also learned that it was okay to feel conflicted, to have a mixed feeling, which I never understood that before, but it's just something I learned over the period of time, that it's all right to feel a bit conflicted. It's all right to have mixed feelings about it, be okay about it, but also be concerned.
Yeah, it's that both and, isn't it? We can be both. We can be happy and sad. We can be grateful and lonely, and it's okay to feel that conflict and that range. So if I just run through a list of emotions, because I think for anyone who's watching, I'd like to just invite viewers to consider whether they are feeling these feelings currently, or whether it's something that comes up frequently for them, and not to judge, but just to notice. So I'm going to read a list of emotions. Okay, so we've got the basics, which are bad, happy, sad, angry, and good. And then we move slightly deeper. So bored, stressed, tired, startled, confused, amazed, excited, playful, content, peaceful, powerful, optimistic, lonely, vulnerable, guilty, depressed, hurt, disgusted, repelled, disappointed, distant, frustrated, aggressive, bitter, humiliated, let down, threatened, rejected, weak, insecure, anxious, scared, helpless, frightened, overwhelmed, worried, inadequate, inferior, worthless, insignificant, nervous, exposed, betrayed, resentful, ridiculed, violated, furious, jealous, numb, withdrawn, skeptical, judgmental, revolted, horrified, embarrassed, inferior, empty, remorseful, ashamed, abandoned, victimized, isolated, sensitive, valued, grateful, shocked, dismayed, disillusioned, perplexed, joyful, confident, loving, intimate, free. So that's a list, but I'm sure there are many, many more. But I think if we can start to drill down to the fact that actually I feel rejected here, or I feel abandoned, or I feel humiliated, embarrassed, whatever it is, that can help to pinpoint a bit more about what's going on for us.
Yeah. And what I found is when I could put a name to it, it kind of took the power out of it as well. So I could say, yeah, I'm feeling jealous, or my pride's hurt, or whatever, and suddenly it was like, oh, okay, so I've named it now. and it just doesn't feel quite as powerful. I think there's something quite human about actually just speaking it as well, you know. So feeling it in my head's one thing, but actually phoning somebody up and telling them this is how I feel, or just saying to someone this is how I feel, that really seems to take the power out of it.
Yeah, it's an admission, isn't it, to self, and if we want to others.
Yeah.
So would you say step one is, what am I feeling here?
Yeah, I think that on with a process, really, this is part of the AA, or I do Cocaine Anonymous, for Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step process, and this is the fourth step. They call it inventory. And the first thing I've got to understand is what's going on, what happened. So it doesn't necessarily mean how am I feeling, it's just what happened, first of all, you know, and who am I resentful at, or, you know, who has caused this. And then I look at myself. I've got various parts of myself, and I'm just going to check a list just to make sure I don't miss any, because I'm not, you know, that. So I want to understand whether it affected my pride, or whether it's affected my self-esteem, or whether it's affected my finances, my ambitions. And ambitions aren't really, you know, I want to be an airline pilot, or do you know what I mean? It's more, you know, it can be things like, you know, I wanted it to go this way and it didn't. It's those kind of things I wanted. Did it affect my personal relationship with someone? Has it affected my sexual relations? So I just need to understand that what incidents have done that, rather than me just rowing off angry, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, just stop and just try and break that down a little bit. And if I can do that, then I've got a handle on what's caused this disturbance in me. But actually, as I said before, if I've got a disturbance, I've got to own it. So now I have to look at, what's my part? Why have I done this? And the first thing I have to recognise is, am I being selfish? You know, and some of these things go hand in hand. So if something happens and I'm not getting what I want, and I start to get angry, it's because I'm being selfish. I'm not getting what I want. So I have to own that selfishness and go, well, you know, this isn't good. Or am I being self-seeking? Am I trying to get some kind of an advantage from a situation that's not going my way? Am I being honest or dishonest about this? Very often I will look and go, bloody hell, if only that person hadn't have done this, then blah, blah, blah. But is that real? Is that true? Or am I just pointing at somebody and projecting onto it? And am I really honest about that? Or is it really about me? And 9 times out of 10, it would be about me. Am I being inconsiderate? I mean, somebody else might be riling me up, but do I stop and think what it's like for them? You know, and what, you know, so am I being inconsiderate? And I found this one, I used to suffer terribly with road rage, you know, and if someone cut me up, it shout and scream, you know what I mean? And I had to stop and think, well, I wonder why they're doing that. Maybe, you know, they're on an emergency. Maybe something's gone terribly wrong. You know, maybe not. Maybe they're just a complete arsehole.
Yeah.
But actually, in a way, either of these things doesn't really, it wouldn't justify me getting angry. Why should I disturb my karma over somebody else? You know. And then the other part that's very important, especially with angers, is what is my fear? Because it's always going to be fear-based. The power of the emotion tends to come from fear. And I need to understand what my fear is, you know, and my fears tend to be quite subtle. We've all got our own things that drive us. I'm not really talking about being intimidated. I personally don't get intimidated by very many situations. Some people might do, and that could be why they get angry. They get fearful and they get angry. Mine tend to be more subtle about, you know, am I good enough? Am I going to be successful? Blah, blah, blah. And then I need to understand what lies underneath that, you know? So if I'm not good enough, then underneath that is this fear that, you know, people aren't going to like me. And underneath that is a fear that I could end up alone. And it's usually when you're alone, then you're powerless and 99 times out of 100, those displaced emotions are based on a fear of being powerless. And that's where it gets to. Now, this is I've just run a shortcut through. It took a while for me to get to, and it's not always easy or obvious as to why the reaction is the way it is. But this is the process that we use, or I use, to actually get to the bottom of it. And then once I can see that, that it's a fear of being powerless rather than me actually being powerless, then I can get control of it and go, well, do you know what? This is not real. This is my head telling me you're feeling a bit vulnerable. Vulnerable's not good. Therefore, you do the old process you've always used to overcome vulnerability, which is get angry and shout and scream or whatever. And that worked when I was a 7-year-old going through trauma. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily useful to a 40-year-old, 30-year-old, 50-year-old, whatever, fully grown adult, So we've got to learn to react a different way. But because we grew up always reacting that way, that's kind of the only thing that we know. And that's why learning a different process of processing the anger or the emotion has become really useful, because now I can actually put the fear into its proper context. I can put it into the time and place that it belongs and not let it disturb my here and now. Effectively, that's how it seems to work.
It's interesting about the what's this feeling of I'm not good enough and therefore I'm going to be rejected. And I think deep down, when we drill most of our fears down, it comes back to I'm not good enough in some way and therefore I will be rejected. And that's the way the brain's kind of programmed to keep us safe, to stop us being thrown out of tribes and safe from wild beasts. And obviously we don't have to live that way anymore.
I mean, it goes right in against one of our core instincts, which is to be part of a group. And suddenly it's like that's threatened, that instinct is threatened, and that's really serious.
And our safety, with that as well. If we're thrown out, we're alone, we're not safe, we're powerless. And this is why it's so important to understand that there is there's a different intelligence within us. So there's the brain, that part of the brain that's saying stay safe, you're not enough, you need to be more and do more and prove yourself all the time, otherwise you're going to be rejected. But there's also a much wiser part of us, whether you want to call it a part of the mind or your heart or your gut, that we can start to learn that we are actually incredibly powerful and that we can create different circumstances. We're not powerless. That is a lie, as you say. So that kind of came up for me as you were talking, the importance of getting in touch with that wiser part of ourselves, which you got from the 12-step program, which is a spiritual program, isn't it? It kind of connects you to a higher, wiser part of you.
I see my brain as being in two distinct parts. There's the thinking bit at the front, and it's the thinking bit that gets me into trouble. And then there's the bit at the back, I've put it back here, that just knows. There's part of me that just knows because it's instinctive. It knows that everything's going to be okay. Blah blah blah. The thinking bit is the one that gets driven by these dysfunctional, when my instincts go out of kilter. Then the thinking part goes, oh my God, there's danger here. I need to do something about that. This is what I do, blah. And it's kind of, and we need to just tune out of that as much as possible. Tune into your much more settled self, your inner voice. That's how I see it. And that helps me to differentiate the real from the false, because the front of my brain will give me an awful lot of false narrative here. She don't like me, he thinks I'm a prat, that one's after all your money, but you know what I mean? It's all this sort of thing, you know, and it's just rubbish, basically. But it's, you know, it needs to be calmed. And that's kind of what the dealing, you know, the processing emotions is like. It's to sort of stop this brain from, this thinking brain from really taking over and really taking me down the wrong path.
Okay, so we come to a point where we realize actually we're not powerless. And we've looked at, you know, what part of me is being affected here. Mm-hmm. And then what do we move on to? Do we look at why?
We can look at why. Why is often based on trauma, and you know, if we can understand that there's some sort of traumatic episode that has left me feeling powerless in the past, where I genuinely was powerless or disempowered, you know, and it was frightening, and my brain, my body has learned this mechanism for coping with that because that worked during that trauma. If we can identify that and see that, you know, see where the trauma is, then there's something to work on. But in a way, that's beyond the scope of my capabilities. That's something for people to take to a therapist or a specialized, you know, someone who's trained and qualified to help deal with that. What we can do, and any of us can do, is just start to apply a different set of values to our lives, a different set of thinking. So if I approach a situation and I recognize that because of whatever the trauma is, you know, my reaction is starting to go out of kilter, I can stop. I can then reassess the situation once I've done the process and understood that I'm bringing fear to this thing. I'm being driven by fear. That is coming out with me being selfish or self-seeking, you know, for all of those reasons of trying to adjust or compensate for the dysfunctional instinct inside me, the greed, you know, or whatever it might be, or the sort of, you know, the over emotional response because I want to be loved or whatever. Yeah. And then just apply a much more, what I'd call in inverted commas, spiritual values to the situation. So instead of approaching it with fear, try and approach it with love. Instead of denying this is happening and trying to run away from it, is just approach it with truth and honesty. Try to be accepting of others rather than frightened of them. Try to be more generous to other people. Try to have integrity rather than fearing that I'm not good enough and therefore I'll try and make some sort of, you know, sort of con in order to, do you know what I mean, to get my way through it, or to lie or whatever. It's just try and do it with a bit of integrity, you know, persevere. That's the thing that a lot of people who suffer from addiction don't do. They just go for the easy. So if I've got a difficult feeling, just persevere with it. You know, if I can't work out why I'm feeling angry, don't worry, just persevere with it, you know, or just have faith. That's the other thing. Have to have a bit of faith that it's going to be okay. It doesn't necessarily mean to have a faith in supernatural being, a god or the universe or anything. Just faith in other people, just faith that something's going to work, you know, and instead of isolating myself, try and be more collaborative, you know. I mean, there's an awful lot of power. I mean, in the fellowships, they talk about God, they talk about a higher power, they talk about the power of the room, you know. There's a community there, and the community is quite important for people like us, really. But also there's a strength in that. As someone said to me, because I didn't understand what higher power was, you know, and they said, well, just do the strength, you know, of the other people. So I said, well, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, if there's a piano in the corner of that room, could you lift it on your own? No. He said, but could 5 of us do it together? Yeah, there you are. It's like, it's that. It's just, you know, become part of, you know, and just recognize that I am a part of this world rather than separated from it. I'm connected to other people, whether I want to be or not. You know, I have an influence over other people and they influence me. whether conscious or subconscious, and to just try as best as possible to feel comfortable with that, you know, to conduct myself with a bit of integrity, to have some hope. You know, these are really important small changes that I could make. You know, I mean, if I go into a room full of people and I'm fearful and I'm aggressive and I'm, you know, then I get that back. Yes. This is one of the rules of karma, one of the laws of karma, you know, and that there's a cause and an effect, and I'm causing that, you know. Whereas if I go in a much more collaborative kind of frame of mind with people, I get collaboration back 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, you know. So it's about just adjusting, really. I grew up really being quite frightened of, I didn't know this, that I was quite frightened of people in situations in lots of respects, you know, due to having low esteem, and feeling that I wasn't ever going to be good enough or accepted. I don't know why I felt like that, but I did, you know, and it just that shaped how I would approach situations. And I had to unlearn that. And I had to learn a different way of being, you know, just to be more open, just to be more honest, just to be more kind of sharing about stuff, you know, forgiving and understanding. I used to suffer from road rage. If someone made a mistake, I'd shout and scream and, you know, like, well, who was being harmed? You know, not the bloke in the van that nearly knocked me off my bike. He was miles away. But I'm getting angry and I'm damaging myself with the anger. And I had to just learn to stop doing that, really, and to forgive him. You know, as I say, he might have had 101 good reasons for driving his van too close to me, you know, when I was on my bike. Or he might have just been a bad driver. But either way, you know, I'm giving myself disturbance. I'm harming myself with anger if I'm getting angry with that person. And I have to learn to forgive. And I have to learn to just be a bit more tolerant, a bit more patient, a bit more kind, you know, and more forgiving.
Well, once we give our power away, don't we, all the time?
Well, I think that's the sharing, isn't it, really? You know, I mean, you know, it just kind of seemed to work for me anyway, just to sort of get me into a calm spot again very, very quickly. Because that's the other thing. If I let my head run with all this stuff, I could make myself really upset for, you know, a day, a week, a weekend. Do you know what I mean? Over trivia, really. And the only method I knew for calming that down was drinking and drugging. And it didn't really help, to be honest, because you just get to a point where it would start rolling around your head again, you know.
And then you've got the additional shame and all of that as well on top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you're going off and doing stuff you don't really want to be doing. Because the other part of addiction is not just this inability to manage my emotions. It was also then that once I had a drink, I'm built in such a way that I want another one. You know, not everyone has that. Some people can have a couple of glasses of wine and hit the sweet spot and just enjoy the rest of the evening and blah, blah, blah. But with me and with people who struggle with addiction, very often it's like you crave more. And it's not about enjoying it, it's about finishing it and getting on to the next one. You know, it's different. Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't have to be drink and drugs. It can be so many other, there's so many other outlets, aren't there, too?
Yeah, food, sex, gambling, relationships, and there's all sorts. Yeah.
Something you said there again about sharing, the power of sharing is something that I can't speak highly enough about. And I find that, you know, having run groups for years, for nearly 15 years now, the power of showing up with others in your vulnerability is so healing.
Yeah.
And to, you know, to come in and say, do you know what, I'm not okay, I feel this. And then someone, and to be heard in that, and then somebody might say, oh yeah, I had that, and or I found this helped, or oh, have you thought about this? And there's real power in that togetherness again, because we are all human. We do all have this range of emotions. We do have discomfort. We do have a huge amount of contrast in our lives, and showing up and sharing in that vulnerability is hugely powerful.
I think it also hooks into a theme that comes up with you quite a lot. Some of the things that you try and teach is about shame, you know, and letting go of it. We feel shame as human beings. But when we realize that we're not the only people doing that, you know, we can let that go sometimes. But, you know, if I'm sitting on my own with my thoughts, you know, we have a saying that says if you're on your own with your thoughts, you're outnumbered. So you really need to get help, you know, and by talking to other people, you know, it's kind of, it takes the power out of it, because suddenly the things that I felt guilt, shame and remorse about, I hear other people talking about it and I think, oh, hang on, that's, do you know what I mean? It's maybe not so unique, if you like, you know, that I'm not the only, it was a great relief to know that I wasn't the only one who did that sort of things or felt that way. And it was also a great relief to hear people just talking about that really openly, because it took the power out of it for me, you know, as well as taking the power out of it for them. So yeah, absolutely, 100%. You know, whatever group that you feel able to join in with, whoever it might be, you know, whether it's one person or 100 or whatever, but just talking it through, running it by people, not being alone, that takes the power out of this stuff. It really, really does.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I think we can kind of summarize how to process emotion, but there's one thing telling someone how to do it, there's another thing physically doing it. So for this session, how would you summarize? So if someone out there is feeling particularly wrapped up in their emotions, overwhelmed by their emotions, feeling lonely and isolated and terrible in their emotions, or numbing their emotions, trying to escape in some way, how could you summarize what you've just explained as a quick process for them, and then we can kind of go into how we can help in a bit more depth? Okay,
so usually it's about it's usually about some kind of anger or disturbance, yeah, and agitation. So if there's an incident that's created that, I just need to understand, first of all, what that incident was. And I then need to look at what exactly happened, and to understand whether that was real or imagined. Yeah. Then I need to check with myself about what parts of myself were affected. Is it my pride? Pride is how I think other people see me. This is the weird thing about pride, is that it can really drive us into quite extreme reactions, but it's actually completely made up in my own head, because it's not what you think about me, it's what I think you think about me, which is really about what I think about myself, isn't it? You know, so it could be about pride, it could be, is my self-esteem hurt? You know, is it my general sense of well-being hurt? Has it affected me financially? Has it affected my personal relations, my sexual relations? And to just try and just answer one of those. So which part of myself is letting me down here? It could be more than one part, but just try and see which part of myself is letting myself down here. And then to sort of just come to that realization that this is all coming out of me. You know, I mean, I'll give you an example of why that, how that works. I mean, I remember years ago, and I used to be a bit of a drinker and a bit of a cokehead. And I was driving along with my mate Stubbsy, who was a bit of a drinker and a cokehead. And he was driving. And a bloke sort of pulled up on the inside of us, some lights, wound his window down and started shouting at us, right? about you bastard, you cut me, and all this sort of road rage I expect, you know, and then sort of said you and your bum boyfriends, or you know, cast some sort of homosexual kind of thing. Now, yeah, I'm not homophobic or anything, but I wanted to punch his lights out because he's shouting and screaming at me and Stubbs, right? And Stubbs probably didn't indicate or whatever, but he's shouting and screaming at us, and I was going to punch his lights out, and Stubbs just sat there laughing. And that was a moment for me as to why am I getting angry and why is he laughing? Do you know what I mean? So it's because I had anger in me, you know, and that's kind of, I was bringing that out. So I'm looking at a situation and bringing it out. It's kind of important to understand why I bring into this whole situation. So I would say to myself, am I being selfish? Yeah, because I can sit here in my own pit, you know, my God, it's so life's awful, blah blah blah. You know, why? What exactly is it? I'm not getting what I want. Okay, well, they're selfish. I have to ask myself the question: why aren't I getting up and doing something about it if I want it to be different? Yeah, I mean, so am I being selfish? Am I being sort of self-seeking? Am I being frightened? Yeah, am I being inconsiderate? Am I feeling oppressed by what someone else has said and done? And am I just blaming them? Is that real? Am I being honest or dishonest about that? And if I am being honest, that like I didn't like what they said, well, maybe I've got to think, why are they saying that? What's going on for them? Rather than just it's all about me, me, me. So try and get myself out of this sense of self. Yeah, that's what I would do. And I think and then diagnose it. Just diagnose, what am I frightened of? Yeah. And then bring in some of these spiritual principles that we spoke about. You know, can I be a bit more tolerant or patient of that situation? Yeah. But also reach out, pick up the phone, talk to somebody. Yeah. Absolutely. And what I find, I'm very lucky because I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. It's a fellowship and we look after each other, you know. So there's always someone I can phone. But what I find works best is not to phone somebody up and say, oh, I feel shit, blah, blah, blah. Let me talk about me and how I feel. Is to phone them up and go, how are you? What are you up to? Is there any, and can I be of help to somebody, you know? So go out there, get active rather than sitting around in my own thoughts. Try and connect with other people. It doesn't have to be a member of a fellowship. It could be your neighbour, you know, you could be someone who's struggling to, you know, whatever, you know, shift a bit of furniture or something. Go out and try and be useful. So my suggestion would be that is to, first of all, understand what I'm going through. Secondly, to accept responsibility for it. And this is me bringing this situation into my own head. And then do something practical, get active, phone somebody up, share it, you know, but actually just try and concentrate on making their life a bit better. Go and do something physical to do it. But that would be the suggestion that I have for people. Perfect. And I know it's not always possible, but, you know, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it will be possible. And I just found there's nothing better, really, than phoning someone up and just saying, how are you? And listening to them, really listening to them, you know, giving them some of my time. You know, it's an act of love. It's an act of selflessness because, you know, I can give someone some money, but I can earn money tomorrow. If I give someone my time, I never get that back, you know, and it's quite important to actually be able to do that, you know. That's what I would do.
Yeah, fabulous advice.
Thank you.
So, yes. So we would like to invite anyone who is struggling or who would just like to look a bit deeper into their own stuff and how they can shift, because what you're talking about there in that process is losing the momentum of these or these thoughts. It's like shift the momentum to something more useful, and then
get your perspective back.
Yeah, and put a foot in a different direction that takes you somewhere else.
Yeah.
So if anyone would like to begin to understand a bit more about, if you'd like to look at your own emotions a bit deeper, to understand what's going on in you, maybe what part of you is feeling afraid, and then us sitting with that, allowing it to move through, and then looking at, actually, I can take back my power. I can use this as guidance. It's showing me that this wasn't working, or that wasn't working, or I'm inspired by this, but I'm too afraid to take a step, or, they're just examples. But we would like to offer a free workshop, wouldn't we, on the 20th of June, Monday, the 20th of June at 7 o'clock. Is that right? On Zoom.
I'm just going to double check that.
Diary to hand.
I'm pretty certain that's about right. Yes.
Yeah. So that whereas this is we're broadcasting live, and this will be shared, that will be a closed Zoom workshop where it's a safe, sacred space for people to show up, bring your stuff, be vulnerable, support each other, and work through and find a way that works for you, because that's hugely powerful, isn't it, when you find a new way of dealing with something as powerful as our emotions.
Very much so. I'd just like to add that it's not just for people struggling with addiction.
No,
this is useful.
Yeah,
it's a part of a process, but it's just really useful for anybody, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny enough, yesterday I did a live yesterday morning, and I was talking about when I first came across the 12 steps. It was through my mum's next door neighbour, Olive. She was 50 years older than me. I used to go and have coffee with her once a week, and we got on so well. She was a real strong, powerful woman, really wise, and she had learned the 12 steps because her husband was an alcoholic, and she loved him, she adored him. She had to learn to live with him and his addictions, and she had that wisdom to share. And as she shared the 12 steps with me, someone who wasn't struggling with addictions as such, it really hit home to me that actually these 12 steps are brilliant for anyone. And yesterday, as I was sharing on the live, I thought maybe that's another session we could do in the future, is just looking at what the 12 steps are and applying them to our own lives, whether or not we have addictions.
That'd be great.
So maybe we'll do that next time. But for now, thanks so much, Alex, for coming on and sharing your experience and your process.
Absolute pleasure.
It's always fun to chat. And if anyone wants to join that Zoom workshop on Monday, the 20th of June, then please just write in the comments or message either one of us, and we'll certainly add you to that with pleasure.
Perfect.
All right. Okay. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hope it's been useful, and catch up with you soon.
Bye now.
For now. Bye.